You are now rocking with BizMode. Let's get into BizMode. What is BizMode? BizMode is entrepreneurship at its highest level. BizMode is flow state. BizMode is that hunger pain you feel. BizMode is success by your own definition. BizMode is operating from abundance. BizMode is what you make it. This is BizMode. What up, though? I am your host, Alex Bruno. I am the founder of Bruno Group, Inc., a California law firm helping entrepreneurs and businesses with their legal stuff. Welcome back, family, to another episode of the BizMode Podcast. As an entrepreneur, one of the first questions you should answer is, who is my ideal customer? Your customer profile is changing constantly, and it is becoming more multicultural every day. Our guest for this episode is Mario Carrasco. Mario is a co-founder and principal with ThinkNow. ThinkNow is a technology-driven cultural insights agency. They help companies and government agencies discover the cultural drivers that drive consumer decisions. A couple of gems from my chat with Mario. First, you really have to focus on your client and your consumer. You have to listen to what they need and create to that need. We are, unfortunately, in my opinion, in a remote/work from home world. But there are ways you can stay connected with your team by making sure you show up for them and make yourself available. I got to also chat with Mario, and I was excited about this because we're fellow introverts. So I got to learn from him about what helps him recharge and stay present. Well, enough about my takeaways. Let us know what you got from this episode. Now, on to Mario. Mario, welcome to BizMode.
Thanks for having me, Alex.
Well, I'm happy to have you on. So why don't we just start with you telling us about ThinkNow?
Yeah, for sure. So ThinkNow, we're a full service market research agency focused on multicultural consumers. Really, our mission is to amplify, be the voice of multicultural consumers. And by what we mean by that is representing Hispanic, Latino, Latinx, Latina voices, African American, Asian in corporate boardrooms through research. We've been around for 10 years, and we're really dedicated to our mission. Now, of course, more than ever. But you watch television, you see products and services, you see a lot of faux pas when it comes to marketing and advertising. I can assure you, none of those faux pas are our clients. We really try to help companies really understand and connect with multicultural audiences in a meaningful way. And so we do that through traditional market research. We do surveys, focus groups. We also do non-traditional, and we have been, and especially now through COVID, doing one-on-one interviews like this with consumers, so online qualitative. We also own and operate one of the largest multicultural panels, which a panel is essentially a group of people that have agreed to take surveys on a regular basis in exchange for incentives. So we license that out to other research companies like Nielsen that don't have that asset. And then we also we have a technology product. We have a SaaS product that's combined our years of research into a big data platform, allows people to go in, input what they know about their target consumer and click search, and you get a really cool persona. Like, you can go in there, say you want to see what Hispanic millennials in the Los Angeles area are into. You click search, you can see what social media sites they're visiting, what kind of cars they drive, what type of websites. So that's what type of websites they visit. So that's what a lot of my time this past 2 years have been focused on that product called Connect.
And then how would someone, or what is your target market? Why don't we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So my target market is really Fortune 1000 companies. Um, not because of the clout, more because those are the companies that have research budgets that are big enough to drill down into specific types of consumers. And so, and our focus is multicultural consumers. So, our clients run the gamut, right? We work with technology companies, Snapchat, Facebook, Google. We work with insurance companies, AARP, the General. We work with automobile companies, Honda, Chrysler, um, a vast array of different verticals, which makes my job super interesting, but always focused on that multicultural consumer. And
No,
then
that's all. Yeah.
another side of the business, doing the same thing, but different clientele, which is government. Um, it operates as a separate department because it's a completely different process, completely different RFP process. So you need individuals that are well versed and have the patience to go through 100-page RFPs. But we're doing the same thing for the government, working with the U.S. Army, FDA, CDC.
Well, thank you for bringing that up. Actually, I have now we're on a tangent note, but there's I know a lot of startup ideas come up with people trying to target like city government, local government, even like the national government. What is like in comparing that with like a Fortune 1000 company, what is like the timeline for like acquisition?
Yeah, and I'll back up a little bit. Even I'll get into timeline, but I also want to share kind of what I've learned. All business is about relationship, as you know, right? And
Right.
you don't really realize how true that is until you start a business. Um, and I'm actually by nature kind of an introvert, so that part of things were different for me until I learned how to navigate it. But I can tell you that with the government, I mean, it's even more so about relationships. It's
Mm,
really, really about who you know, um, and not to, not to generalize, but it is. I mean, it's very political, right? And so, whether you're partnering with a company, the contracting officer, um, it really is about how you know more so than in the private space. Look, when you're a B2B company, of course, relationships are important, getting the right introduction. But it is possible for you to break in and get Fortune 1000 clients without having a relationship or having a really good product or service. With the government, it's very different. When you're talking about timelines, um, yeah, I mean, I would say in general for us as a services company, and I think this holds true for most things, let's say a traditional acquisition cycle is 90 days for a SaaS product, um, or whatever it may be for the government, multiply that by three. I
yeah.
mean, because
No, that's great. Yeah.
you have an RFI, a request for information. And by the way, working with the government, you're going to be an expert in acronyms. Um, you have RFIs, which is just the government putting out feelers like, hey, what type of companies are out there? So it's not even a potential project yet. Then they issue the RFP maybe 3 months later, and you respond to the RFP, and then you get some questions back and forth another 3 months, right? So you're already at 6 months before you even heard an answer. Then you get, and to move into the top three, another 3 months. So yeah, it's a brutally long. You have to be extremely patient to work with the government, but there's a huge potential upside.
Right. No, I'm glad. I'm grateful for you bringing that up because as a business attorney, I see it when people come in and say, I have this idea and here's what my customer is going to be. My customer is going to be the government. Or I've sat as a judge on some business pitch things, competitions and stuff like that. And I always have to bring up to the founders is like, if you're going to be targeting government, you got to have that patience. You got to know your cycle is going to be a lot longer. And so it's good. I'm glad I got some backup from you.
Yeah, and I mean, you gotta have a good cash runway, right, to be able to make it that long. And also, with the government, I mean, sure, you deal with a lot of companies that they have one specific client, one specific contract in mind. The reality is you're probably not going to win it. Like you got to have a lot of contracts out there. It's a numbers game too. Um, we're constantly responding to RFPs and RFIs. So you got to respond to a lot of RFPs and RFIs before you win.
Right. All right. So off of that tangent, sorry. Thank you though. Getting back to ThinkNow, I want to take you back, like 10 years ago. You're about to start this company, but you were at another company. And for many entrepreneurs, just like yourself, it's a turning point, right? And I'm kind of curious as to what you went through in terms of a mental process with your co-founder and stuff like that to say, you know what, we're gonna start this company rather than going a different route.
Yeah, so the previous company I was at did something very similar to ThinkNow, except they were solely focused on Latino consumers, which we expanded to include African American and Asian, and they weren't a technology first company, so it was much more traditional, phone bank research. Um, and I really loved the previous company I was at. If it hadn't been acquired, I would probably still be there. Excellent people. It was minority owned and operated. Um, Honestly, I mean, more than half of our leadership comes from that company. So I'm really grateful for its existence. And um, my business partner was my boss and the person who hired me at the previous company. Um, and so that company, um, was an excellent company. And I was hired to build their online panel at that time. And um, fortunately, I was lucky enough. It became the number one revenue generator for the company within 2 years, and that's what led it actually to be acquired by another research company called Knowledge Networks, and then subsequently GFK, and then subsequently another company. But at the time, what really drove the decision for my business partner and I to leave was a lack of leadership. While we all, definitely believed in the team that was built there and the vision and the mission, um, unfortunately, the company was experiencing somewhat of a financial crisis, loss of big contracts, and the way that it was handled really soured my business partner and I,
Mm.
because we believed in the company, we were pushing, we were coming up with solutions, and the leadership at that company was disconnected at that point. Um, they gave up, for lack of better words. They gave up, and it's really disconcerting. And I think it's really a lesson now that I internalized as a founder, that I empathize with leadership and how they felt, right? Because we've all been there. But as a
Sure.
founder, you got to balance being transparent and also being optimistic and inspiring your team, right? And so that leadership was really just clearly wanted out. And so we had pretty nice salary offers. We had pretty nice, the first 5 years we were kind of kicking ourselves like, man, we should have taken those that that salary, right? So it was definitely tempting, but I'm glad we didn't go, because ultimately at the end of the day, we didn't believe in the leadership, and I we knew that we were gonna while we were gonna be acquired, we were still gonna be operating under that same leadership, that same company. So I think that was the number one driver. Two, we really saw the opportunity, back then. This is 2011, late 2010. We knew that the multicultural consumer base was just growing exponentially, and we felt like, um, given that multicultural consumers in the US comprise 40% of the population, we didn't believe that just being, a small piece of a larger company really gave, really allows you or enables you as a company to dedicate the resources needed to understand that consumer. We truly believe that you need a company that's 100% dedicated, right? When you're talking about 40% of the population, when you look at Gen Z, they're going to be the first minority majority generation. So now you're talking more than 40%. How can you have just a department dedicated to those insights, right? Like you
Right.
need a whole company. And so that was the number two driver. And then number three, my business partner and I thankfully had a lot of contacts in the industry, had a lot of goodwill working with our clients. And we felt like, we had some clients that would be dedicated to us and our vision. So it made that transition easier.
Nice. Well, thank you for that, because it's important to point out, like, not all roads appear easy, but it's
Yeah.
it's rewarding at the end. And I mean, it's still not the end for you, obviously, but tell us,
Yeah.
so where you're at now, what did it take you to kind of like build a team? Because you were with a team, and then it's just at some point it's just you and your co-founder, and then it's like, okay, now we got to build our own team. How did that experience feel?
Yeah. I think, thankfully we won projects, very early on. And we were able to be profitable from year one. And year one, we were just, we were taking whatever we can get. We had a vision of what the company was. When we first started, we actually didn't think that we were going to become what we became. In other words, a traditional market research company powered by technology, multiple departments. Back at that time, one of the products that were really hot were market research communities, where you get 100, 500, 1,000 of your core consumer in like a online environment and ask them questions on a regular basis. And so that's in our mind. We thought we were going to be the multicultural version of that. Um, and we did. We won, year one, we did win some big contracts to build communities, but we quickly realized that that was a fad.
Mm.
Um, and companies started reaching out to me for sample, which is the panel side of the business, because that's what I had done at the previous company. And companies started reaching out to my business partner for traditional market research, focus group, and surveys. And on the onset, we said, yeah, we don't want to do that because that's very capital intensive. We have to hire people. But companies kept asking. So little by little, we just evolved to what what companies were asking for. So, we said we would never build a panel because you have to buy the software, you have to recruit people. But we ended up building a panel year two. We said we were never going to do full service market research, but we ended up doing that year one.
Mm-hmm.
And so as contracts came in, we were white labeling our services at first, right? Utilizing other companies, other contractors. We would design the research, put together the questionnaires, all that. But really, we're outsourcing almost everything early on. But as we started to get more work, we started hiring people. So really, I mean, from day one of ThinkNow, we've evolved by listening to what our clients need and want. And so that's how we've slowly, organically, have turned into the company we are today. We've never taken venture capital by choice. Even early on, one thing I left out, we had an offer to take, day one. I mean, this is before we even had a website or a name. The purchasing entity, one of the executives from the purchasing entity of the old company, met with my co-founder and I and said, "Hey, I love what you guys are going to do. I believe in your vision. I want to give you 500 grand, and but you have to promise me to never build a panel.
Mm,
Ironically, back then we were like, yeah, we're not going to build a panel for sure.
sure.
Even though now it's 50% of our revenue, but we thought, well, if he's offering us 500 grand to not build something, we probably shouldn't take it.
Right.
And I'm glad we did it. But we've never taken venture capital, so that's why we've been around 10 years. Our growth has been slow but steady. But we own 100% of the company, so we've been able to evolve and iterate more nimbly than maybe a company with venture capital.
Was that part of the motivating component to you and your co-founder, is to not take any funding? Is, what, you did want to have that control, you did not want to have your ownership stake being chipped away each round and each investor?
It has become that. There was a point in the company when we were growing and we were doubling in revenue year after year early on, and we thought, hey, let's get some venture capital. And when you're in that growth mode, you want more of that. It becomes
Sure.
addicting. But I think, thankfully, my business partner are very aligned from a personal standpoint of what we value. And I think during this process of building the company, we realized that we both really value our independence. And so as we started to explore venture capital and understand, what it even means, right? Because I think a lot of people go out there and want funding because it's out there on social media.
Right.
But when we started to realize what it means and what we would have to give up, we stayed away from that because, to your point, that autonomy, I think, is really important to us, and is a core value of our company now.
No, that's great, and I think you hit it on the nose in terms of how there is a lot of communication and just a lot of people into it just because it's on social media. I mean, Twitter is just, I don't know how this happened to my own feed, where every time I get all this I guess it's because the people we interact with, right? I get all this VC stuff,
Yeah.
and it's just like, it is just all this messaging, and I'm I'm a conservative approach person, so I'm always like, take your time with it. You don't have to say yes to everything, and at the same time, it might not be right for you, especially if you're, if you're a different type of company. You don't need scale. Sometimes the true reason to get some of this funding is because you don't have the funding to grow, and you need help with growth.
Right.
But a lot of people get caught up in the, being able to tweet about it. Hey, we raised a round, as opposed to what is it going to do for your company?
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
mentioned
Exactly. Yeah. And no, go ahead.
no, sorry. No, but I mean, so you just transitioned a little bit. You mentioned this earlier in terms of, you had to do some like changes in your business, and from COVID, because of COVID. Can you kind of explain like what has transitioned for you, um,
Hmm.
due to the pandemic, due to people having to stay at
Yeah.
home? So I'm giving you half a question.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mario.
So no, it's all good. So our team, the majority of our team is remote. So I think we have about 30 employees now, including my co-founder and I. And the way that we've structured the company is, the leadership is here based out of Burbank. So there's, my co-founder and I and 6 other people, SVPs and VPs. The rest of the people are scattered across the US. We have several employees in NorCal, several employees in the Chicago area, several in Atlanta. Then we have some ops in Tijuana, Mexico, and then we have some project management based out of India. So there's been a remote component to us since day one. But leadership. I think the biggest change is just leadership not being here. Um, so I would say fundamentally our business hasn't changed too much. Um, but leadership not being here is difficult, right? I mean, you miss those kind of just random interactions here in the office, and quick questions you might have asked if someone was close by. You're not reaching out necessarily. So we're doing different things to try to engage everybody. We've put out employee spotlights. We try to do more Zoom meetings, but I'm a fan of in-person work. I know a lot of people love the remote thing, but I definitely think you need that in-person interaction. So we're waiting to get back, and I know leadership is looking forward to getting back into the office.
Yeah, no, hopefully it's sooner than later. But fingers crossed on that. In
Yeah,
terms of, I mean, a lot of people are still adjusting to working from home and with their companies and that. And you mentioned your company has been doing this for a while. Is there, I don't want to say secret sauce, but what have you done to keep that, to keep the company culture, like build it up, since you have people throughout the country and throughout the world? What have you done for that, and kind of like to make sure that the values that you and your co-founder, what that started with, is everybody's kind of experiencing that as well? So what have you done for that?
yeah. So I mean, having a global team is difficult. I mean, it's constant work, especially when someone is so far away, like India. Thankfully, our Tijuana office, it's 3 hour drive, so it's not too bad. But India is a different story. So I mean, one thing that we did prior to the pandemic, we were going out to Mumbai and having like an India summit every year, my co-founder and I. Um, when you have remote employees, making sure you show up as a founder, I think is extremely important, because there's only so much phone calls, Zooms, chats go. You need to know leadership is there, that they care about you, that they care about you enough to see you face to face, right? So if that's something that you're thinking about, you gotta get out there. Now, thankfully, I was there in November, so it hasn't been too long since I've seen that team.
Sure.
Um, but now it's checking in. I think it's easy as you grow. There's more and more layers between you and entry level employees. So making sure that you have a good onboarding process, um, letting employees know that they can reach out to you at any time, right? And saying that is one thing, but I think being able to demonstrate that, randomly calling, randomly, chatting, hey, how are things going? And then, of course, if someone gives you feedback, acting on that, right? Because there are times that I have had employees kind of skip the chain of command, reach right out to me, and I think it's really important to follow up, right, if there's issues that they're experiencing with their manager or whatever it may be.
Well, that's it's great feedback, because I know a lot of people. One, you've mentioned, just working remotely and how you check in and how you show up for your team, and then two is just kind of as you scale, things get like farther away, and how do you want to make sure that you're
Yeah,
able to contact others?
yeah, and
So
it's a constant learning and juggling act, right? I mean, it's something that I'm doing now, right? And also like grappling with the fact that um, I mean, I think as entrepreneurs, we all like to do. We're all doers,
sure.
and now I'm more of a manager. And not to say that's not doing anything, but I've had to reframe my work as more as like setting up people for work as opposed to me doing the actual work myself, which is difficult for me.
Right. No, I totally get it. I totally get it. And then you have that, well, at least for me personally, you got that micro like management style that you got to get rid of.
Yeah,
Like that whole,
yeah,
like you got to let go. I always tell people, you just got to let go and trust, let go and trust
for
and,
sure.
and keep coaching yourself. Uh, you, you, you mentioned like, there's faux pas that are out there in terms of, people are trying to reach a multicultural audience, trying to reach the multicultural consumer. And then we had like some things happening. There was the George Floyd killings, which set off a bunch of awareness and protest as to the way people are treated. And then but companies also try to say, try to show that they're unified with it. And I mentioned to you before we started recording, a lot of people did the Instagram black box. But what would you tell a
Yeah.
company that's really, really, they're all in, right? They're like, we want to go in, and we want to do it right. What would you tell a company who really wants to go in and really approach, you know, multiculturalism? And I know I'm giving you a big general thing because that's what you might tell me to. But like, how do you approach a company that says, we're in, Mario, come, help us?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm biased, obviously, but I mean, step one is understanding your consumer. Um, and of course, for large companies, that does mean research. But I'm not advocating for that for everybody. But I think understanding your consumer is number one. Um, you know, in the light of this new awareness of multiculturalism, but in general, as you know, as a startup, understanding who your consumer is. And I would go as far as to say, if a company does some reflection and understand their consumer, I would say that there are some companies that it doesn't make sense to have the black box. You got to really understand who your consumer is. Now, there might be some pushback there, though, right? Because I just threw out some numbers. 40% of the U.S. is multicultural, and really, when we say multicultural, we mean non-white, right? And as you start to get into younger generations, um, now you have the majority that are non-white.
Right.
So maybe it makes sense for every company to understand that in some way because multicultural consumers are really the future. But in terms of making statements, I think there are companies. I would say the vast majority of companies shouldn't have made statements because one, they don't understand who their consumer is, um, and multicultural marketing, and I think more specifically, social justice is not social media. It
Yeah.
is or a social media post. It's dedicating yourself to that consumer for the long run. Consumers are more savvy now than ever. They are. I mean, especially younger generations, millennials, Gen Z. They can sniff BS really, really well, and so you're going to do more damage to your consumer base putting out a statement than taking the time to sit back, understand your consumer, and release. Maybe it's not even a statement, right? Maybe it's some initiatives that promote that is going to go much further than social media. So in general, number one, I would say understand your consumer. Um, Number two, um, you know, investing in I think if you're going to be there's two sides to it, right? Because there's the multicultural marketing aspect and there's the social justice side.
Right.
And I think that's number two, is separating that and realize those are two distinct things. That you have multicultural consumers, you have to understand them. There are social justice issues. So who's your multicultural consumers? And that's going to determine what social justice causes that you should invest in. Um, so yeah, so that's, I know that was a long-winded answer, but I think, I think we have to kind of disentangle social justice from multicultural marketing, because just because you did social justice doesn't mean that you're reaching multicultural consumers, and vice versa. Just because you're doing multicultural consumer marketing doesn't mean that you're doing a social justice initiative.
I think it's great that you made that separation. I would also add, and this is from my perspective, but like, knowing what your mission is and what your purpose of your company is going to be helpful too. So if you're just, it just seems like disingenuous. Like you mentioned, it's disingenuous if you just put out a statement because everyone else is, and so you feel like it's like a FOMO thing, or I don't know what it was, or people are going to think you're, I don't, whatever you are. But sometimes I think, like you said, like if it doesn't fit because that's not your purpose, and like I don't know. It's a weird one. It'll come off superficial without thought, I think, if you're just doing that first step of the black box.
Yeah, and I mean, I think also I'm not a diversity and inclusion expert, but I've been learning a lot more about that, and because we're consumer facing, right? We're helping companies be more diverse and inclusive, outwardly facing.
Right.
But I think as a company, you do have to take an inward inventory before engaging in social justice or multicultural marketing. Because if your house is not right,
Yeah.
how are you going to go out there and say, "Hey, we're gonna do this campaign targeted towards African Americans," and yet when you look at your leadership, you have 0 African Americans at the table. I think that's another aspect of it. That's a whole other podcast probably, but people will sniff that out. Like you're out there putting a statement, and I mean, this happened to so many companies online, right? That where they put out a statement and the employees are like, "Yo, you guys just put this out, and it's terrible for me as a brown or a black person to work here." You know, that's even worse than consumers coming after you, right? When your own employees are calling
Sure.
bullshit.
Sure.
So you got to make sure that stuff is in check too.
Sure. And I would just say, we're looking at you, NFL.
Yeah.
It's like, it's just been interesting. You're right. It is a whole podcast. We could just do a whole case study on a couple
NFL.
companies.
I mean, wow,
Yeah.
right? Like, there you go. Like, I mean, there you go. That's we don't even have to say anymore. NFL.
So we have someone wants to start a B2C, right? A B2C business. And I know one of your pieces of advice would be like, know your consumer, right? Know who you're going to target.
Right.
Is there anything else that you would tell them if they come to you and say, I want to start a company and I'm going to focus on, it's a B2C company?
Again, I'm biased here, but rarely do I see startups that start with multicultural consumers in mind. And given where this company, if you're a US based company, right? And rarely do I see startups that have that consumer in mind. I mean, and it's kind of crazy to me, right? Like it's always an afterthought.
Yeah.
They're all about getting the product right from a technology standpoint, or the messaging right for a service product, or whatever it may be. But I think you're going to be so much far ahead from a product or service standpoint if you can bake in the multicultural consumer now, right? And not have to adjust things later. And this goes for any startup in the US. I mean, whether you're B2B or B2C, right? Because if you look at B2C, yes, we're 40%. Again, younger generations were the majority. But if you even look at B2B, I mean, who's starting companies? It's brown and black people, right? I mean, the future of entrepreneurship is multicultural. We're starting more companies per capita than any other demographic in the U.S. So either way, I think that's the biggest advice that I would give is think about multicultural consumers from the onset. Don't think of it as an afterthought, because they're going to be the majority of your consumers within the next decade.
That's great. I mean, I'm as you were saying that, I was thinking of a commercial I saw recently. It's for some kind of food product, like I think it was some avocado oil something, but all the actors in it I did not relate to anybody.
Yeah.
And so it was just very interesting because I was just like, wait a minute, they're in some picnic somewhere, but I couldn't hang out with any of these people. So who are they marketing to? So I totally get it in
Yeah,
terms of
exactly.
that. Yeah, cool. So shout out to you because fellow introvert right here. I guess actually I learned the term
Yeah.
ambivert like the last couple years or so in terms of like I don't feel totally you know totally like where I have to be always in the background. I can come forward and back, but I'm not completely extroverted where I go to a party and I love it.
Yeah.
What do you do to recharge?
I'm a big, I'm really into fitness and the outdoors. So I'm a big mountain biker.
Okay.
I mean, that's kind of like the perfect sport for me. I mean, I get my fitness in and I'm in the outdoors. I kind of get lost for a couple hours out there and come back and recharge. So um, I get out about twice a week. And then the other days I don't, I'm on my Peloton.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah. So I think fitness is a big recharge for me.
Yeah, I find I'm a runner by I guess by I was gonna say by nature, but I'm just a runner. So I used to run marathons back in the day.
Oh,
But
nice.
I've always felt like it's like a meditation for me in a way, like because I actually solve problems while I'm doing that kind of stuff. It's unintentional, but it just happens. I'm
Yeah.
like so that's it's very interesting. So in
Yeah.
terms
For
of the
me, I've realized that. Sorry, go ahead.
no, that's cool. Add it. Did we lose train of thought?
No, I was going to say, I've realized that no, that it's meditative for me. I don't really solve problems. I realize they, I exhaust myself to the point where I can't have thoughts. And I think
Ah,
that's that I like about it, you know?
nice. Okay. So what have you done? I mean, we live in a I would say we live in an extrovert world, right? Where we live where like a lot of quote unquote extroverts get highlighted in terms of the more outgoing people get highlighted a lot in terms of that. What do you do to not fall into the trap of trying to be extra? I'm going to say extra twice, extra extroverted. What do you do like for yourself in terms of it's planning out your week, planning out your yourself? What do you do for that?
I mean, so disclaimer, I do fall in the trap of becoming extra extroverted, right? Especially on social media. And I'm like, this is not me. So it's a constant battle. But I mean, I think you do have to be. I mean, I think there is pressure as a founder to be active on social media.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to have some kind of presence. Um, I'm still figuring that out. I mean, I just started to use Twitter more personally. I mean, because before I just used to tweet out stuff about my company and that's it. And people don't engage with that, right? They want to know who you are, but that's uncomfortable for me.
Yeah.
Um, so, I mean, one thing that I do is I write. I'm a writer. I mean, my undergrad is actually in literature. Um, it's something I'm passionate about, and thankfully, it's good for business. So I write 2 or 3 blogs a month. So that's one way that it's something that's natural to me. It helps my business, and I enjoy it. So I think there's so much advice out there in terms of how to be online, how to market, you know, what to do, videos like this, right? Putting out thought leadership pieces. I've tried all those things, and ultimately I go back to writing. So I think for people that are introverted, I mean, finding what works for you and just be consistent, right?
Hmm.
Just being consistent with that because um, whatever you do, people like consistency. Google likes consistency, right? So you got to make sure that whatever you choose is something that's repeatable, and that you can dedicate yourself for the long run. I just got into podcasting too, so I do 2 podcasts a month, and I really enjoy that format as well because um, I don't have to talk as much, right? I get to have
Sure.
somebody on, and I'm genuinely interested in what they have to say, and it makes it fun for me.
I totally agree with you. That's why that's one of the reasons why I started
Yeah.
this instead of having videos of me talking for 30 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
So in terms of what is inspiring you right now? Like any books, podcasts, uh, documentaries?
Oh man, what's inspiring me right now? Um, I really like the new Michelle Obama podcast.
Mm,
Um, it's I think in terms of a model of to my point about being authentic, I really appreciate her for that, right? I mean, she has real conversations. She just had one with Conan O'Brien about marriage. I mean, and it was the most, real conversation I've heard in a long time in terms of relationships. So I'm pretty into that right now. Um, I really like sci-fi.
nice. Okay.
I'm a big sci-fi person, so I'm watching Raised by Wolves on HBO Max. I don't know if you've seen that or heard about it, but it's
I've heard of it. Yeah.
really good. Yeah, sci-fi is super inspiring to me because like you get it's really a reflection on human potential, right? And so when you like see what's possible, you could take that back to earth, temper it a little bit, and be like, get inspired by that. To me, that always helps me.
Very nice. So, follow up to your sci-fi question: do you fall either in the Star Trek camp or the Star Wars camp, or does neither?
I'm not good enough at science to be a Star Trekker, so definitely Star Wars.
Okay, cool. So what's next? What's next for you or Think Now? Tell us what's happening.
um, yeah, what's next? I mean, I think, as I mentioned, I'm really focused on our new technology product Connect. And so I think that's the next evolution of our company. It's really a culmination of all the work that we've done this past decade in a SaaS platform. Um, we
Sure.
have our first client, which is amazing, a major brand, and we just hired a salesperson that's fully dedicated to that product. So scaling that is really what's next for us. Trying to get as many brands to use the tool, and I'm really proud of it because it's gives you the ability to understand multicultural consumers on demand. I
Mm,
get it for lots of insights professionals and marketing professionals, they don't have time to wait for traditional market research 3 to 5 weeks. They want answers now, and so that's really what our tool is providing. And so, that's where we're headed.
cool. No, thank you for that, and thank you, and best of. It sounds like a great product that you're Connect you've launched already. So hope maybe we'll have to have you back just to talk about that evolution. That would be fun.
Yeah,
Um,
thank you.
how do people get hold of you and plug your podcasts?
Yeah, for sure. So, thinknow.com is our website. I'm personally Mario X Carrasco on LinkedIn, at Mario X Carrasco for Instagram, Twitter. For our company Twitter, at ThinkNow Tweets, and we're pretty active on LinkedIn as well. Oh, and the podcast is the new mainstream podcast, and so we're on Apple, Spotify. Um, I think we just got on Amazon, so check it out.
No, for sure. And I think I might have heard the new mains. I might have heard that somewhere. So it sounds very familiar.
Yeah,
But no. So thank you, Mario, and we'll put all that stuff, show notes, and take care of that stuff. Thank you for spending some time with us and for sharing a little bit about what's going on with you and your journey.
thanks, Alex. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Until next time, BizMode family,
This is your host, Alex Bruno, Bruno Group Inc., BizMode Podcast. Keep your family first. Always strive for perfection. Don't forget, none of this is legal advice. By the way, what happened to peace? Peace.